Hello, everybody. This is Mike from the Hey, Are You Still There podcast. My wife, Beth, and I would like to invite you to join us each week as we examine life at the intersection of marriage, family, careers, and ministry. Through 28 years of ministry, 26 years of marriage, 23 years of professional careers, and 21 years of being parents to 3 kids, our fun and honest discussions promise to have something for everyone. And now, on to the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Hey, Are You Still There podcast. This is going to be part 2 of our Enneagram story. And good news, I'm not doing this one solo because Beth is back.
I'm back. Yay!
Cheered on like a true 7.
Did everybody miss me?
We did. We had some disappointed folks, as I knew they would be, not having you on here and letting it be just me.
I feel so special and loved.
But I felt like for that first edition, it did kind of all start with me.
Yes,
and,
it did.
We were not familiar with the Enneagram until the retreat with Ian Crone and the book and kind of going from there. But that launched kind of your and I deep dive into the Enneagram, but not just me and explaining things to myself and understanding things for myself as far as being a 1 and being that perfectionist, but it gave you some enlightenment to you also.
Yes.
So go ahead, let everyone know, what number are you, Beth?
Well, first of all, I can't just say what number I am. And let me tell you why, because it plays into the number that I am. So at one point you talked about being a 1 and I was like, oh, I can be a perfectionist sometimes, like sometimes I'm hard on myself and do those things. But then I also thought that I was a 2 because I think I do a lot out of a place of love in my heart, and I like to help people and I like to serve and stuff. So anyway, I just kept going back and forth. I would read the numbers and I'd be like, oh, I might be that. I might be this. I even thought for a little while there was a chance I was a 3. Now there's some numbers I knew that I wasn't, like a 5. That's one that I probably definitely wasn't, or a 4. I'm not those numbers. But anyway, the big reveal is that
And you're definitely not a 9.
Oh, no.
You're not a peacemaker.
Hey, now, why?
I'm just saying.
What about an 8? Confrontational.
You're an 8.
No,
Yes.
no.
You could be an 8.
But I'm not. I am a 7. And the reason this whole thing plays into being a 7 is from everything I read, 7s are the least likely to commit to being a number or to say that they are a number. Like 7s, again, it goes back to this whole idea of like, we want to keep our options open. I don't want to be put in a box, And so 7s have a really hard time, I think, identifying as a 7.
7s are known as the enthusiast.
Yes.
So what's some other traits that you've learned about that are positive about 7s? What are 7s like? So if somebody's listening right now,
and they're like, oh, am I a 7?
Yeah, how would you identify, and again, this goes back, the Enneagram is about motivation.
Yeah.
Why do you do what you do? It's not necessarily, the Enneagram's not to tell you about how you behave,
right,
but why you behave the way you do. Well, so what's a 7?
Well, the first thing is on the outside, what oftentimes they'll see. So again, this isn't the motivation piece, but what people may see when they see a 7 is they often see somebody, they're called enthusiasts because they're very enthusiastic, very passionate, like a kid in a candy shop approaching life as like, I want to try these things. I want to have these adventures. I want to be busy. I'm very curious. I'm spontaneous. I want to ask questions. So those are the things that people are going to see. Part of the motivation, or the things you feel inside as a 7, I think are, you have an intense, probably FOMO, which we talk about all the time, that I have FOMO, but a fear of missing out. But I wouldn't say a fear of missing out on everything. It's more a fear of missing out on things that you think could be really important, like a fear of missing out on time with families, a fear of missing out on an adventure, a fear of missing out on an opportunity. So 7s, I think, really like to have adventures. We always want to have something to look forward to, and I'll talk about why in a second. Also, 7s love to have their options open. They do not like closed doors. So for me, when I think about the motivation, sevens are really trying to avoid pain and sadness. And the way that we do this is by always looking to the next great thing. Because for us, the future holds these opportunities, and the future holds this opportunity for something amazing that's going to then help us escape any sadness or pain that we may feel. That's why, interestingly enough, with the seven, they're all supposed to be like associated with one of the seven or the nine, whatever, the sins or whatever. That's what
seven deadly sins.
Yeah, and the sevens are associated with like gluttony, which I was like, what? I don't get that, because I'm like, you always think about gluttony as like the person who just is a king and eats a lot until they're like whatever.
Indulges in the sweets.
Yes. But sevens, I think, is more about we're almost gluttonous with experiences, with with planning, with having ideas for the future, with the experiences, with learning new things, with doing new things. And I think people see us as super busy, but again, we're doing a lot of that. We want to keep our options open and have these opportunities in the future because it's a mechanism to avoid sometimes sitting with pain and sadness and really processing that.
Okay, so in your experience, what are the positives of being a seven?
So I think for me, the positives of being a seven is that truly, and this isn't just about what people would see. I think when I'm really focused on something and excited about it, I am truly about as high can be as far as happiness. Now, on the opposite side, when I get low, I get really low. But when I am, planning something or in the middle of an adventure or being spontaneous or learning about things or maybe even just being curious about the world, I am truly all in. And it doesn't always have to be too, I know people might think, well, a seven would always have to be like on a European cruise or doing something. It's not even that. Like for me, sometimes it can be little things like Josh and I sometimes when he was young and he loved insects, I remember we'd go in the backyard and he might give little breadcrumbs to ants and I would watch them. And then that would spark this enthusiasm and curiosity in me. Like, well, how did these ants do this? Why are they doing that? Like I would really want to dig in and see and learn everything that I could about that. So I think that curiosity and enthusiasm about things just makes life more fun and exciting and makes life feel more real and vibrant because you just are approaching things as a seven with truly this enthusiasm and sometimes too spontaneity. Like sevens, we tend to be the ones that are kind of like, ooh, let's just go do this or let's try it. One of my friends, Jenny, that we used to do this online Bible study called Verse Girls, she's not a seven. She's much more measured and reflective and taking time. And I remember we were like, oh, we should do this online Bible study on Facebook. And Jenny was thinking she had her whole list of all the things that we needed to do. And I was like, oh, well, I've already set up the Facebook group and invited people. And she's like, what? But we just dive in, And so, that can be negative too. But I think the positive to sometimes just diving in, even things like this podcast, if you're just like, okay, well, I'll try it. Let's do it. That sometimes means that you take risk and try things that other people would talk themselves out of because of fear of failure. So we'll just dive right in and it gives us opportunities, I think, sometimes to pursue.
So it sounds like sevens are the life of the party and are always happy. Is that true? How can seven have a negative side if sevens are full of life and always wanting to try new things? How in the world can a seven be negative?
Because I think like everything else, well, first of all, some of the outward negative things that you guys would see on the outside, like the people in the world we're spontaneous and we're fun. But I think sometimes it can be hard for us to be in the present moment because we're so future focused. Even if I have attained so I always have to have literally a vacation on my calendar, and it doesn't have to be a big one, but I have to have something that it's I have to have this thing in the future that I'm grasping for, that gives me hope, that gives me the ability to get through the drudgery of normal everyday life. Well, I guess that would be one part of what's hard as a seven. Everyday life, monotony, just the normalcy of routine, that's like drudgery to us. That is, it's hard. And we sometimes become so future focused that it's really difficult to just be present in the moment. So even if like I'm on the vacation, like let's say that I'm planning, sometimes it's hard for me to be like, oh my gosh, I'm fully appreciating this vacation because my brain's already thinking, oh, I need to come back here and bring one of the kids, or I need to be sure to tell Mike about this because on our next trip, we'll do XYZ. We're so future focused out
Which
there.
Which is mildly infuriating.
Yes.
Because I don't know how many vacations we've been on, and let's say we're on a 5-day vacation. By day 4, you're already depressed
Yes.
because you have to go home in a day or two. And I'm always like, just enjoy where we're at. And you're just like dreading the end of the vacation that's not even there yet because you don't have something else already lined up.
And like we see it, like I see it with Maria, like I'll take her to Disney or she'll go visit a friend. Well, literally the very last day, she is already getting moody and sad and talking about how depressing it's going to be to go back to, quote, normal life. Because again, that drudgery of like, you mean I have to just like do all these normal things that may not be sparking this curiosity and adventure?
Which on a side note,
hard.
I am so glad you get to experience that now.
I know.
Because that's what I've had to experience
Your entire life.
For almost 27 years of marriage. And just the other week, Beth and our daughter was at Disney. It was our daughter's spring break from college, and they went to Disney for a few days. And I remember you texted me on the last day, and you were like, Maria's in a mood today, you know, da 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 da. And I'm sure it's because she had to come home.
Yeah.
And I was like, welcome to my world, Beth, because that's how it is every time we take a vacation. Is that last day, you're so depressed about having to leave and go back to normal life. It's depressing.
Well, the other thing that's hard for 7s is we need options open. And I didn't realize this. This was one of the things that was very enlightening about doing the Enneagram. I mean, of course, none of it's perfect. It's kind of like, I think a lot of these personality tests or different things that you can do, none of it's going to be 100% accurate, but it's more just helping you have some insight into what drives you. And so for me, I've always been the person, I'm very afraid to close a door. So, you know, when I was trying to decide what career I wanted to have, I remember one of my roommates was like, what's Beth going to be today? Is it going to be a physical therapist or an astronaut? Because like, I was very terrified of like closing doors. Even when I graduated college, you know, when you and I were married, I had applied to a master's teaching program. I had applied to get my PhD in biochemistry, and I had applied to law school. And those are 3 very different careers. And really was on track probably to get the PhD in biochemistry, but was holding that door open for law school. But making those decisions there is difficult for me because once I committed to law school, I had, quote, closed the door. So then my options are limited. And I think for a future focused 7 that doesn't want to feel boxed in and pinned in and trapped, it can be really hard for us when we feel like doors close. I even think when I think about aging and stuff, that's some of the things that I think about for me that's hard about this aging process. It's not, you know, for some people, it's like how they look or whatever. I mean, I care about that. I don't want to say I don't, but for me, it's more about, oh, the world's not open with a million opportunities. I can't just wake up today and decide that I want to be a neurosurgeon and commit 12 years to that training because my time's limited. So there are doors that are permanently closed, essentially, to me now. And that's really hard as a 7. And then the final thing is, I can't speak for all 7s. Again, this is all from my personal experience, but I didn't understand this whole thing about we do all this to avoid pain because as a person that has suffered from depression and anxiety throughout my life and has been in counseling since I was maybe 15 years old, off and on, I've done a lot of therapy. So if you asked me, I would think, oh no, I'm really good at processing my pain and processing my emotions, but I'm not because I do it. I did it in a very intellectual headspace way. I processed my pain through talking about it, but I've never been good at like sitting with my pain, in my pain. I avoid it. And so that's one of the things with sevens. We're seeking that security. We're seeking the safety. We're through these, in the future, we're going to have it through these opportunities, and we're avoiding just processing the sadness and the pain or whatever, like just sitting with it. I might process it talking about it. I might acknowledge that I'm having a little bit of it, but my inclination is the moment that I'm feeling sad or depressed is to try to push it down, and then avoid it, which then to the bad sides of that, I think leads to, you can only push things so far down for so long before they kind of explode and come out, either in depression or anger or some of those ways. So with sevens, we run ourselves ragged to the point of exhaustion. And then when we crash, that goes back to like, we have the really high highs, but I think our lows can be really intense, because when we don't have the adventure and the curiosity and we're exhausted and we don't have the things in the future to help us avoid our pain, and we're stuck sitting with it, we really don't know what to do with that.
Which is interesting, because in our intro episode, I'll say, I made a brief mention of this, and I wanted to kind of dive into this. The Enneagram is made up of 9 numbers, and those 9 numbers are divided into 3 groups, and they call them triads. 8, 9s, and 1s are together. 2, 3s, and 4s are together. 5, 6, and 7s are together. And each of these 3 groups they believe is birth from a certain part of the human body or soul. And for example, 8, 9s, and 1s come from what they call the gut triad. I get that. As a 1, I don't make a lot of decisions emotionally, based on my heart. I'm not a super analytical person where I have to sit there and think through it over and over and over. I trust my gut, and I go with my gut. What does that gut feeling say? It feels natural to me to do that. The 2, 3s, and 4s are the heart triad, and they make their decisions based on emotions, based on the emotion of the heart. How are they feeling? They love hard. They depress hard. I guess I'll say that.
Yeah.
They can get very lovingly infatuated with something, and then get very melancholy and feel the heaviness of emotions. And so a lot of artists come from that triad, especially the 4s and 5s. We see a lot of artists come from that. But then you have the 6, 7, 8s, which come from the head triad. And these are the analyticals. These are the folks that tend to, let me rationalize this. Let me think through this. The 6s, one of their holdups, and we're in the next episode, we're actually going to talk about the positive and negatives of each number as far as how they connect with other numbers. But 6s, they tend to overthink things to the point that it's hard for them to make decisions.
They have analysis paralysis.
They do. They have analysis paralysis, and and 8s are like the aggressor, kind of that. How would you describe it? 8? You're kind of
they're like they think they're wanting to protect people. They want to
it's not bad, but they have a strong sense of...
It's like the mama bear.
Right or wrong.
Right, like I'm going to protect these people in my care that I care about.
And that is birthed through their mind, like this is what I think. A lot of things are very black and white. And they don't mind standing up for what they feel is right and being... what people might say, they might say that they're abrasive or aggressive, and it just could be they have a strong sense of what they feel in their, or what they think in their mind. But how does 7s fit into that head triad? Like, what is that for you? Because you are a very analytical person. You're very smart. You're an attorney by trade, which sounds kind of crazy that people think about a stuffy attorney being the life of a party. So how do you see a 7 fitting into the head triad?
Well, I think one of the things with the 7s, if you read about them, they also sound a lot like people with ADHD, which I also have. But I think the 7s, the way we are, we process things trying to like think through them to make sense of them. But I think for us, the head triad is more about, and this isn't just me saying this, if you read about them, like 7s aren't necessarily, it's not like they're geniuses, but it's more the way we process information because we're usually really good verbally. We're good at expressing our ideas, but we're also really good at multitasking and taking in a lot of information. We're like the people that when you get us in a room, we're like, let's brainstorm. Let's throw all these ideas up there. We're the people that make lots of connections between things that other people may not see. So it's not about like where some of the other numbers may be very analytical and logical and able to take things through these logical steps. With 7s, I think it's more about taking all of this information, being able to learn really quickly, being able to absorb lots of information from a lot of different sources, and being able to then brainstorm and make these connections that other people may not make. And the great thing about that with 7s is that we are, I think, really good at I'm like you, we've talked about this before. I consider myself more of like a visionary, like seeing things, the ideas, making the connections, like we're good at that. I think on the flip side though, is we are curious and make all these connections and usually can learn things pretty quickly. Sometimes it's difficult. I shouldn't say sometimes, I feel like all the time for me, like I get these things and I'm all in and then I lose interest, and then I'm all in on my next adventure or thing that I want to learn about. So like, we'll joke about it. Like somebody said something like, well, they released files about UFOs. Well, then there I am. I'm reading everything about UFOs. But then the next day, we're at Bugfest and I'm learning everything about how a spider exists and, the rainforest. And so that means that it's hard for us to, I think, really know what we're good at and really know what we want to do, because it's almost like when you have all this information that comes in and it all feels exciting, you almost get paralyzed with like well, what is it I want to learn about? What do I want to do? Which things are important to me? What am I really good at? Because you just have so much going on in your head. There's a lot. And it's funny too, because we talked on one of the episodes about my to-do list, which you make fun of, but I've read that's a thing I think with a lot of 7s too, is like, we just have so much in our head. And sometimes we've got to dump it out somewhere. We've just got to get it out of our head.
Yeah. And I think, for like you and I, for example, me being in the gut triad and you being in the head triad, every day, literally every day, you will ask me my opinion about something.
Yeah.
And I'll give it like, hey, what do you think about this? Or should I wear this? Or what are you going to eat? What? I mean, just to simple day-to-day stuff to major things. And I'll give you my answer. And you're immediately like, why?
Yes.
Why do you feel that way? And I'm like, I can't explain it.
Support your reasoning behind this. You've got to support it.
And I have no emotional attachment to my decision because I'm not in the heart triad. I probably have not thought it through, because I'm not in the head triad. It's just my gut. Like I just feel like this is what I feel is right. But I'm comfortable in making wrong decisions. Like I'm not saying my gut is always 100% right. It's like, hey, this is my gut. I'm going for it. And if I'm wrong, I'll learn and pick up and move on. And I think for a head person,
we're gonna know.
When you make a decision, let's say it, and then it doesn't go right.
Yeah.
You beat yourself up because you're like, I've thought about this for not just hours, but probably days and weeks and months. And I thought I looked at every single possible scenario and still, this food wasn't good, or this trip wasn't as planned. This hotel wasn't as nice as I thought, or, this car that I just purchased was a lemon. Like whatever it may be, like you've thought about it so much, you can't believe that it didn't work out. And,
well, it's interesting because I went to a conference one time and they had us do, it was a lawyers conference. It was all women and we did like this Enneagram, and like there were like 2 7s in the entire room. Like that is not a common number. Lots of 1s and 6s and 5s and things like that. So it doesn't feel like it fits. But one reason I think the 7 does work is like when you're always future focused and looking at all the options and all the ideas and processing the information, to your point, lawyers spend a lot of time trying to predict everything that could go wrong. So whether we're writing a contract or advising our client, like if you're like, hey, Beth, I want to purchase this building, for work. I'm going to be thinking about, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if, and so for me, if I'm this future focused, I'm thinking of all these things, I'm trying to predict it, I'm in my head all the time, I'm processing everything that could happen. If I miss one of those things, then it's like, how did I miss that? How could I have not known this? And that goes not only for my job, but to your point, to my personal life. Like, how could I not have predicted every possible outcome that could have happened? And how could this bad thing have happened or this mistake have happened? And that's where the beating myself up comes in. But on the flip side too, when I ask you why you like something, if you ask me, Beth, why do you like this pink vest that you have on right now? Well, I like it because it's thin, but it's also very warm. And I really like this color because it's not really pink, but it's sort of lavender. Like, I can articulate all the reasons that I chose this item. And that goes for anything. I can tell you why I like or don't like why I believe ketchup should not be on meat products and ketchup should only be on French fries. Yeah. I can do that.
Yeah. And looking at our kids, and this has been fascinating. And once you start to understand the Enneagram, and it's not just good to know for yourself, it's also good to know for those closest to you to kind of help maybe understand why they behave or why they act the way that they do, what motivates them. And our daughter is absolutely a 7. I don't think there's any doubt about that. She is her mother's child. They are one and the same person. But our 2 sons, I believe when Jacob took the test, he was a 6, which kind of goes in line because he is in that head triad. He thinks things through. He thinks a lot. He's a very internal processor.
But where Maria and I, we're like, we process and we verbal process and we know immediately. Jacob goes away to think about it and comes back.
And he second guesses a lot, which is a trait of a 6. He's the guy that will order a hamburger, and as soon as the hamburger gets put down at his table, he's like, I should have ordered the chicken. I mean, before he even has it, it's just kind of that. Josh, on the other hand, I believe Josh could be a 9. I don't know for sure, but that's kind of where I have speculated. 9s being the peacemaker, which falls in line with the gut triad, which is what we're talking about. Because I think Josh goes by his gut a lot also. Because there's a lot of times when Jacob will ask Josh, why do you like this? And Josh is like, I don't know, I just do. And Jacob's like, well, you got to know why. And Josh is like, no, I just do. Why can't that be my answer? I just do. And Jacob's like, no, I need to know, And Jacob's searching for, well, obviously you've had to have thought about it or you wouldn't. And Josh is just kind of like, I don't know. I just, it's my gut, without saying it's my gut. But that's kind of how he goes. So it's, there's not a lot of heart in our family. So if those numbers hold true, we have 3 in the head triad and 2 in the gut triad. So it's interesting. And I'm going to point you back toward if you missed the intro, I encourage you to kind of listen to that. I dive into what 1s are. We do a quick flyover of what the Enneagram is, but I put links in the podcast, and I'll also put links in this one where you can take your own Enneagram test. There's a lot of free ones out there, and I think they're pretty good. I think they're fairly accurate, but they're free, so they're not going to get as in-depth. There's a great one. I believe the initials is like WPSS. It's like $15. It is like what's considered the national Enneagram test, and it's pretty intensive. But it will not only tell you what you are, it breaks down everything. And so it is a great, great test. And that was the one that I had to take when I went on the Enneagram retreat, and I believe Beth took it also, and it's a great test. So I just encourage, if you're interested, you can kind of speculate on your number, but there's some free tests and really inexpensive paid tests that you can take that will clear up things for you. The other thing I wanted to clear up is on the last episode, I was talking about Richard Rohr and his book, and I made the mistake in calling it the wrong name. I said his book was The Sacred Enneagram, and his book is not The Sacred Enneagram. His is, which I didn't think was right when I was saying it, his is The Enneagram, A Christian Perspective. Is Richard Rohr's book. And like I said, it's a very heady book. And there is one called The Sacred Enneagram, and it's also very heady. So if you're a deep intellectual, you'd like diving into stuff like that, like a Beth, then those books will probably really appeal to you. The Road Back to You is, to me, a very applicable book. It's one that is an easier read. I can understand it a lot clearer. And it's funny. I told Beth this morning that I had posted on Enneagram Reddit forum, like, hey, here's some discussion. We're doing a 4-part series on the Enneagram if anybody's interested. And, as people are, one of the comments was already like, oh, The Road Back to You is not a good book to read. You need to read this book and this book, already criticizing it. So I'm not saying The Road Back to You is perfect. I'm just saying it was perfect for me to get introduced to the Enneagram. And Ian has written a follow-up book to The Road Back to You, which does do a little bit deeper dive into stuff. But anyway, check the links, take the test. We'll also have links to the books on the podcast, and you can kind of click on those if you want to purchase those and read them for yourself. Then I'd encourage you to do that.
And I think it's interesting because it's just like anything else. Like I said, none of it's ever perfect, but it is a tool that helps you, just like knowing if you're an introvert or an extrovert or an internal or an external processor. Like, not only does it help you better understand yourself, it can sometimes help you understand the people you care about that are in your life, because that's one of the challenges I would have with the kids is kind of they would get in and it's like, what happened at school? Why did this happen? Why did you do that? What about, and they felt like they were being interrogated, but that's my love language. I'm curious. I'm asking all these questions because I want to know every detail about not only what happened to them, but then why they made the choices they had. I want to understand them. And so, but for our boys, sometimes that's like, whoa, why are you coming at me?
Is there a number that you don't get along with? Like, is there a number, like a one that you're just like, just for whatever reason, all the number such and such that I've met, it's been hard for me to really get to know? Because I definitely have one for me.
I don't know that I do. I mean, and I don't know. And maybe this is like me wanting to keep my options open and not be like, oh, there's one I don't.
I think you do have one.
What do you think mine is?
I think 3s are hard for you.
Yeah.
Because 3s are known as,
Three
in a negative way, a chameleon.
But I have friends that are 3s, and I guess that's why I hesitate to. So again, this isn't a global statement, and maybe it's more when we talk about unhealthy versus healthy 3s. And I think for me, 3s are particularly problematic sometimes in the workplace and things like that, because I value authenticity. I really value being who you are. And I don't know that that's associated with being a 7. That's just a core value, I think, for me as a person. Like, for the most part, I try to live my life like the Beth you see at work is within reason, I'm professional in things at work, but the Beth you see at work is the Beth you're going to see at church. And that's the Beth you're going to see, on vacation and at home and all of that. For 3s, I think what bothers me is sometimes the lack of authenticity. This idea of like, presenting this front that either, you're smarter or whatever. And also just not being willing sometimes with 3s, I think in the workplace particularly, to just say, I don't know.
And 3s are needed because 3s can walk into a room, feel the temperature of a room, and be who that room needs them to be. And I have a great friend, and he's a 3, and he knows he's a 3. And I feel like I know him fairly intimately. Mm-hmm. And so when it's him and I one-on-one, I feel like
he can be that authentic person.
I see the real.
Yeah.
But I've also been in enough meetings with him, and places where he has to kind of put on that 3 persona, and it's kind of fun to watch because you're like, okay, well, that's not the dude that I see necessarily, but it's what's needed to lead this group of people. So I'm not saying, like you said, 3's not a bad thing, but for you and your love of authenticity, and 3's can come across, especially a negative 3, can come across very phony and a poser.
And I think even though I love artistic, deep people, sometimes 4s are probably a little hard for 7s because 4s can tend towards the melancholy side. But it's they're artistic.
They're Eeyores.
But they can, whereas
and you're
I'm Tigger. I'm 100% Tigger. So maybe, and that would be the other thing if you've got, but again, there's a place for that. Just like when you look at Inside Out, there's 100% a place for sadness. And it also doesn't mean 4s aren't ever happy. Just like I just told you, 7s, even though we're Tigger, when we crash hard. So it's not that, but it's just more, I think, that yin and yang, like they're so different in some ways than the 7 who's out there like, grabbing opportunities and looking for things, and like versus, the very introspective inside, artistic 4s. But
I think for me, the number that's always kind of been difficult for me to get along with are 8s. And I don't know why that is, but it's that, like you said, that aggressor, that black and white, but I'm fairly black and white. And
we also have a lot of friends that are 8s, which is interesting. We have a lot of friends. Our church has a lot of 8s.
They do. Yeah. And, but that's what I've had to learn. And, I'm going to try to censor this as much as I can. I've had to learn through the Enneagram and through the 8. Is this woman an 8 or is she a B? If you know what I mean. Is this guy an 8 or is he an a-hole?
Yeah.
Because there's some of it, like I said, is nature and nurture.
Yeah.
And by their nature, they may be 8s because they are defenders. They don't mind stepping up and kind of being that bulldog if they need to be. And
it's like the difference between being, like you said, a complete jerk that's mean to everybody versus who doesn't want somebody that's going to come in and defend you and care about you so much that they're going to fight for you. Those are two very different sides.
But I don't know why 8s just have always just like that aggressive, like it's just, it takes me a bit, but there are some 8s in my life. I'll just name them. They might listen, but like I think about Kim, who's our CFO at the nonprofit, right? Like she is a great friend. She ain't scared. You know what I mean? She'll say anything, like whatever. Like if we get overcharged on a bill, at church, and I see it, I'm like, Kim, could you call them? Yes. It's like she's ready, where I would be, for me, I'm like, oh man, I just, dreading that tough conversation at times. And the other one is Jerry, like I love Jerry in that she's a woman who can roll up her sleeves and get things done. And I love that about her. And because I don't have that, I don't want to say mean streak, but I don't have that like in me to want to be as forceful as she is sometimes. But so I do have, those are two great friends of ours, Kim and Jerry, and they're both 8s. But
we're both such people pleasers. And I think that's why for us, you look for the people who aren't nice 8s. That's why I think they grade us so much because they're not trying at all to please anybody. But for the friends who are the 8s, like you're talking about, like Kim and Jerry, that's why we love them so much, because they're not afraid to be in a good way.
They're 8s with grace.
Yeah. They're in there like fighting for what matters and taking up I think about them as like, they're the Jesus that goes in and turns over the tables, because they're like, what you're doing isn't right. Like I think about them being that part of Jesus, that's like in there, like, I'm not going to put up with this. And that's an amazing, beautiful thing that the world needs. Yeah. It's just boring
and that's
for us.
A good analogy because you think about like a Peter, when Peter pulled out the sword and cut off the guard's ear, and Jesus was like, what are you doing? Like, I think that's that aggressive 8.
Yeah.
That
I am here to protect you because I care so deeply about you. Yeah. I am going to do whatever it takes.
Right. So, but yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do on the next episode, part 3 of our 4-part series, is if you thought one number was a lot, well, you have another number too, and it's called a wing. And so what you're going to do, and we're going to dive into this next episode, is you're going to look at your number and one of the numbers beside of yours. So for example, I'm a 1. So I share qualities of either a 9 or a 2 because they're what's next to me on the wheel. And Beth is either going to share qualities of a 6 or an 8.
Yep, world, watch out. So Mike may have some real problems with me because sometimes I go to my 8.
Yeah, you're not going to, and there, you may share just a tiny bit from each, but one of those 2 wings is going to be dominant. And so when you hear people, and we're going to talk about it, I'll just do a spoiler alert. I'm a 1 with a wing of 2. And so I'm that perfectionist, but helper. As I thought through it, every job I've ever had has been about helping people. Even going back to high school, I was an usher at our local Coliseum, helping people get seated. I worked at a grocery store. I bagged groceries. I worked at a sporting goods store. I sold shoes. Like, it was all about service, and now in ministry, that's the job. It's all about serving God, serving others. And
I'd say my spoiler is I'm a 7 with the wing of an 8, which that's about, I'm an advocate. I'm in search of justice. That is deeply rooted. I talk about authenticity. That's why, even though I'm a people pleaser, I will go, I think people have seen me get fired up, will see quickly, that I can become that very passionate advocate. And I can pretty quickly go to, I'm going to protect and stand up for justice and for what I think is fair.
Yeah. So that'll be the next episode, probably next week. We'll put part 3 out, but we're going to look at wings and how that plays in to the complicated life of the Enneagram. It's not as simple as being a 1 through 9. It's, all right, here's my number and here's what else I am. And we'll get into that. And then the final week number 4, we're going to look at the positive and negatives of each number, because again, you are not only your number, you're not only your wing, but when you're in a good space, you reflect the good of another number. When you're in a bad space, you reflect the bad of another number. And I know this is getting confusing, so that's why you need to take the test and pull up the Enneagram picture and look at it. And you're going to see lines all over the place and arrows and things like that. And we're going to do our best to explain that over the next 2 episodes.
But also it's hard. Sometimes I think I would find myself like, oh, I wish I was that number. Every number I'd read about, oh, I wish I had that. But maybe that's just a 7, like wishing that we had like.
Yeah, I don't wish I was any other number.
Oh, I see. For me, I look every number I'd read about. Oh, I wish I could say that I was that, or I wish I had this. But again, I think that's the other thing. It's not about. That's the other thing to remind yourself. It doesn't define you or anything. All it does is give you some insight into what's motivating you and what's driving you, and maybe a little insight into why you do some of the things you do.
And maybe by the end of the 4th episode, we'll determine which number is the best.
That just totally invalidates everything I just said, because
and which is the worst.
Yeah.
No, there is no best or worst. There's the best part of you in your number, and there's the worst part of you in your number. And we'll get to that. But thanks again for hanging around and sticking around another Enneagram pop-up podcast. This is Mike and Beth. This is Hey, Are You Still There? If you've enjoyed the Enneagram talk and you want to hear just some other things, and this is your first time kind of landing on our podcast, we are just a couple of married folks who are examining life through the intersection of marriage, family, careers, and ministry. And the Enneagram has been a part of that. And so that's why we're taking a deep dive into that. So you can go back and listen to any of our other podcasts. That'd be tremendous. You can find us on any podcast site. You can also follow us on our Facebook page. We put up a lot of stuff there also. But until next week, this is Mike.
And Beth.
And we'll see you later.